About something that's happening to pretty much every one of us as individuals, as groups, as communities, as nations, and that is mass confusion, massive confusion, and polarity. So something I've been saying a lot, and it's so important to understand, is that when you shift the size of your frame, when you see things from a bigger context, when you see more of the picture on the top of the puzzle box, the jigsaw puzzle box, what happens is things shift. So what once looked a certain way will now look even exactly the opposite way. For example, there's a story that is used as a mashal, as an analogy in authentic Kabbalah a lot, and that is the idea that we can't really understand because we don't have the big picture. So the analogy that's given is, imagine that you were an alien who'd never been on Earth, and you fly down in your flying saucer and you're able to look inside of a hospital operating room, and we don't know what it is or what's happening there or why. So what you see is people in white robes and masks and knives and blood and someone tied to a bed, and it looks horrendous. But when you have the bigger picture, when you understand that this is a hospital, this is a doctor, this is the plan, this is a healing, then the entire picture shifts. And I could give a lot of examples of that, but I just want to bring the principle really strongly home first, that when you have a bigger frame, and you can write this down, I suggest you do, when you have a bigger frame, every time you learn something new, have more context, have a bigger view of the whole picture, the deeper picture, your experience and how you see what's happening, even your perceptions, will shift. So I don't want to spend time giving a lot of examples, but let's give one more. A little kid running into the street. His mother tries to tell him you can't go in the street. He doesn't listen. He's curious. He runs into the street. His mother loves him so much. She's never been harsh with him, but when he does it for the fifth time and he almost gets hit by a car, she smacks his hand to make a point. He feels like his mother hates him. Does she hate him? No, she really loves him, but he's missing the bigger context. So that's just another example. So why are we so confused? What's happening now? And I want to talk about confusion because I think it's the confusion that we're experiencing and the polarity that's coming as a result, where to the point where I don't know if you're experiencing this, but I'm definitely experiencing this, as is everybody I personally am in contact with, that one person can look at events and see them one way, and it's so clear and obvious that it's that way, and another person can look at the exact same events or situation and see it in a completely different way. And which way you see it will depend on your frame. Now, why is this happening? Why is it happening now that we are seeing things so differently, and that we're so reactive to it also when it didn't happen before? So for that, I want to give you a bigger frame. When the world was created, it was created with a deliberate breach, a deliberate flaw. And that was, the Garden of Eden had a snake in it. The snake contained all of the possibility of evil that would ever exist in the world. Why? And when Adam and Eve ate from that snake, from the snake's urging, ate from the tree of good and evil, a tree of knowledge of good and evil, so they internalized, I'll explain in a moment, but they internalized the energy of the snake. And each one is carrying that around in a very individual ways and very powerful ways. Why? Because in a perfect world, there's nothing to be accomplished. In a perfect world, it's stable in a certain sense, but that's because evil and confusion and darkness is held at bay. When it's internalized and brought into actualization, not just potential. And that's what happened with the eating from the tree of knowledge. Now there's a great fall. It's tremendously traumatic and difficult, and it's generated incalculable suffering. And it's for a purpose, because the world was ultimately created so that we could turn darkness into light, or rather reveal the bigger frame, the deeper light within the darkness. And once that happens, because of the internalization of evil from the snake, because of the imposition of what we call the human condition on the original state of paradise, with that fall, because of that, we've gone all the way down to the bottom, and now we're stepping back up, level after level, and we're almost at the end. At that point, we have walked out of darkness. We have transmuted darkness every step of the way. And now there's no place to fall anymore. And there's no potential evil. There's no darkness that is lurking outside the boundaries, because it came inside the boundaries, was personalized, internalized. And internalized is being and has been transformed. It's largely done, but we're at the end, and I'll explain that in a moment. And that means that there's no more. God is revealed everywhere. Goodness and light is revealed everywhere. That's really what this project is about. So that's a piece of the bigger frame. Now, when Adam and Eve, and I want to say that according to Chassidus and then to Kabbalah, every single human being who is alive now, or who ever lived, or whoever will live, is part of the cosmic superorganism, like the cosmic meta body of Adam and Eve. Already you have the polarity. Adam and Eve was created as one being that's male and female, and then was separated. So this is a deep theme, which I'm not going to go deeply into at this moment, but we want to understand the general outline of it. So we all have that experience. On a cellular core level, we're all experiencing a fall from paradise. That's why we so long for it. That's why we feel like we're not really home and we want to be home, because our inside remembers. Our cells remember, our soul remembers, our heart remembers what it felt like to be home, and the pain of that exile and that yearning to go home again, because we were there. Everyone is part of it. So when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what happened was that the snake energy was internalized. That little voice turned on and started commenting on everything. And it's in Hebrew, it's the tree of knowledge, the Eitz Hadas. Knowledge means connection, like your personal reality, your personal consciousness. So it's the tree of consciousness, of personal consciousness, Tov Rav, good and evil. And Kabbalah explains that when that act happened, not only were there the consequences of every aspect of the human condition that we've been experiencing from then until now, but what happened was that good and evil, in the beginning, there was all good and godliness in paradise, and then there was potential evil in the form of the snake, and the snake's cunning, and so forth, the snake's defiance. Once there was the eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, there was a personal perspective where each person became the center of their own universe, in a way that good and evil were mixed up together. So truth and falsehood, not just good and evil like you're nice or you're mean, or you're kind or you're a murderer. That's not really the core of what it means, although it extrapolates that way. Good and evil means what's true and what's not true, what is God and what is hiding God. So that got mixed up together. Kabbalah explains that from that moment on, there is no such thing as pure good without any evil, even a tiny drop, a subtle drop, and there's no such thing as pure evil without a tiny drop of good. We could say purpose. So one of the things that's prophesied by the Torah to happen at the end of days as part of the reigniting, the reawakening of a cosmic consciousness, and maybe I didn't say that one of the aspects of this is that each person has their own individual das. So there is das elyon, consciousness, knowledge that is all-encompassing, divine, supernal. And then there's das tachton, a lower consciousness, a human consciousness, which is like a little distorted slice of reality. So it's not only that we just see a little piece of reality, we don't even really see reality most of the time, because everything is filtered through the emotions that were generated as soon as Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. If you're familiar with the story, you already, I'll say it quickly. If you're not familiar with it, you can just go look. It's in every, copy of the Bible in every language. Adam and Eve ate. They realized they were naked. Previously, they didn't. It's not just that they were physically naked, but they were naked of mitzvot, of commandments of goodness. They were ashamed. All of a sudden, shame came into the world. Fear came into the world. Guilt came into the world. These things never existed before, not in a manifested way, only in potential in the snake. What a blow. And immediately, as the Torah relates, as the Bible relates, they hid, and God came and said, "Where are you, Ayeka?" And they didn't want to say. And then he's like, "What happened? I told you not to eat from this tree." And Adam is like, "It's not my fault. It's the woman that you gave me." So we have not only fear, guilt, shame, and blame, and yeah, whatever the other way. Now we have blame, and now we have projection. And then God turned to Eve, and Eve said, it's not me, it's the snake. So instead of being able to face reality, now we have the projection reality. There are many, many, many initial consequences to this, which created on the spot the complex reactive human wiring, that little voice, the ego, the need to defend, the need to hide, that core shame that disconnects us from an awareness of God and an awareness of our real selves. All of this is part of the plan, part of the plan. So again, the bigger frame, you have to know that this had a purpose. What's the purpose? Ultimate transformation of darkness to light, a revelation of God even within the darkness, a revelation of divine love and blessing even within the darkness. Individual perspectives allow us to feel real and to take everything very seriously and personally, and to, however effectively or ineffectively, to wish to be better, to wish to have things better, so that we're doing the work of transformation, even if it takes lifetime after lifetime. But the thing is that now we're at the end. So the geula will be a state of reality in which infinite divinity, infinite das Elyon, the higher, all-inclusive divine consciousness, will be revealed not only outside of us, but inside of each and every one of us. How is that possible? Because of the work over many generations, over many lifetimes, individually and collectively, of revealing, choosing good, clarifying what's right and what's wrong. Like, it took a while. What happened in our human history in the first generation after the fall, at Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel? So there was fratricide, there was murder. Okay, what happened right before Noah's Ark? What generated that? The entire creation, not just the people, but the animals, had perverted their way, and cruelty was the order of the day. Kindness was, people who were kind were ostracized or persecuted. So things were very distorted, and over generations we have worked with them, believe it or not, until the nature of nature has changed, and the nature of our nature has changed. Now, there's certainly outliers, but most of us know that it's not right to kill, and we wouldn't do it, right? Unless to save our lives, or the lives of somebody that we love, from an evil person. Most of us even have heavy reservations about stealing, let's say. And most of us at least believe that there should be justice and kindness in the world, that there should be a higher order, that we should care about each other. This was not always the case. At the time of the fall, the entire core, almost nuclear evil energy of the snake was individualized, internalized, emotionalized, and activated, so that Cain couldn't keep from killing Hevel out of jealousy. And in every generation, there was barbarism. It's not that it's totally gone, it's just uncool now. And most people, I often think of the World Trade Center, which certainly was barbarism, but what happened, I lived in New Jersey at the time. What happened from the people who were there were firemen, many of them, who were running up the stairs to rescue people in the midst of the burning, falling building. What is that? That's a sign of a rectified humanity. That's a sign of goodness. Okay, let's get to our times. So the prophet Daniel says that at the end of days, Yisbaru v'Yislavnu kol hadvarim, that things will become clarified. All things will become sifted out, sorted out, and clarified. And he goes on to say that the foolish will not understand, but the wise will understand. So what does it mean by wise? People who have a bigger frame, who are looking for the bigger truth. Remember, when you have a bigger frame, when you understand more about the bigger picture, which I'm giving some of this now, that bigger picture of what's happening. So when you have a bigger picture and a bigger frame, you're wiser. Things reorganize. You can see more of the truth. None of us have, at this point, higher consciousness, das Elyon, but we're moving in that direction. And when we're able to connect with another person and see their perspective instead of fighting against it, and add it to our own, not to override our own, to create a higher order blend, that's already a much bigger vessel for truth. And when it's 3 people, even more so, when it's 5, when it's 10, when it's 100, when it's 1,000, and at some point it gets a critical mass as people, they call this awakening. And it's very powerful, and it's happening now. However, just like in birth, when just before the baby is ready to come out as a new life, and all the pain is going to end and all the joy is going to begin, it's most intense, it's most confusing, it's most overwhelming, it's most painful. And it's for a reason. This is the paradigm of how things work, and that's where we are right now. So things are unraveling. Why? Because when Adam and Eve, in other words, all of us as cells in that cosmic superorganism, ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, at the urging of the snake, we, again, as part of that superorganism, as cells in that cosmic body of the first man, the collective man, we internalized snake energy in a way that did not allow us to see truth anymore. And no matter how much we're trying, that the core result of that, now there's some people who are literally want to do evil. They're not certainly the majority. I did read in a book that 1 out of every 25 people is a sociopath. Sociopath lacks the ability to empathize with anybody. And I think there might be a high percentage of those in positions of power, because it would be pretty easy to get in a position of power if you don't care about anything, right? And you don't have to tell the truth or whatever. But most people are not. Most people are a mixture of good and evil, and most people are predominantly on the side of good. But what's happening is, as we're seeing things move into chaos, and as we're seeing all these things that shock us, and all of a sudden out of nowhere there are people, whatever, burning cities, tearing down statues, and we, wherever you are in the, wherever, I have strong opinions on the matter, but it doesn't matter. Wherever you are in your observation of what's happening, I'm pretty sure that you have villains and heroes in the situation, and that other people might have the exact opposite, villains and heroes. Why is that? Because the confusion is coming out of hiding. The underground, hidden evil and exploitation, whatever the inauthentic agendas have been, are coming out of hiding. Things are exploding into the open, like when you you open a toxic wound, and the pus that stinks is starting to flow out, and it's so disgusting, and you can't believe it was in there, but better out than in, right? And that's what's happening now, and it's part of prophecy. So here's my suggestion, my invitation to myself and to everyone, and please feel free to share this video, and also like if you like it, comment if you have a comment, question if you have a question, and most of all, internalize this if it's valuable for you, if you relate to it, internalize it in your life. So what you want to do, part of the process of clarifying for yourself, is do whatever you can to get a bare frame. As I mentioned, the Gate of Unity School for Spiritual Empowerment is designed to help you do that through a variety of means: transformational work, deep learning of authentic Kabbalah and Chassidus, healing, conversation, community, connecting with like-minded people who have another piece of the puzzle and can connect with you to expand everyone's consciousness. So if you want to check that out, the link should be on the description. It's www.gateofunity.com/school. That said, you want to be aware of the emotional underpinnings that keep your perceptions locked into a smaller frame. And that is the other part of what happens, not just the confusion of the eating from the tree of knowledge, the snake energy, but it is the emotional underpinnings where Adam and Eve felt shame, and they felt fear, and they felt guilt, and they hid, and they blamed. That was superimposed by divine design. Nothing went wrong. I know it sounds crazy, but this was the plan. The Torah is the blueprint for creation. But each one of us holds an individualized, remember the Das Tachton, the individual lower Das, the very distorted, small, incomplete consciousness. So what holds us to that state, what keeps us from learning from each other, what keeps us from being able to receive information that might feel confrontive to our ego, that is the emotional underpinning of shame and fear and guilt that was part of the snake, that was activated and brought to life within the cosmic humans of which we are all a part. So you have to know, I want to lean forward and tell you this, you have to know. It will be a tremendous, incredibly empowering gift to you to know, to really wire in that your shame is not personal. You feel like you have flaws, there's something wrong with you, you don't want people to know. Some of us feel, that a little more overtly than others. But if you feel any aspect of that, that is not because there's something wrong with you. Yes, you have things to work on. That's your mission. You were created with things to work on, like Adam and Eve were created to internalize the snake energy, because humans are here to turn darkness into light. If you had no darkness, if you had no fear, no shame, no guilt, no defensiveness, what would you have to turn into light? What's the point? So you're here with all your stuff because you're carrying a particular bandwidth, a particular facet, a particular flavor of the snake energy that your soul came down to recognize and rectify. And it should be a work of joy. Yes, sometimes we get triggered. Yes, we do. And that, when we're hiding from what's really happening, when we're personalizing and emotionalizing the experiences that we have and being ashamed, so then we're not going to see it and we're not going to be able to transmute it. We're not going to be able to learn. We're not going to be able to work on it. And then we remain polarized because we can't learn from each other, because there's so many things we can't see because it's too scary, because we just can't. But when we can change our perspective, understand this bigger frame, that you came down with all your flaws, not because you're flawed, but because you're powerful, because it's your mission, because your soul was eager to do it, even if now you have amnesia and it doesn't feel as easy as it looked from up there. And that's a fact too. And when we share and when we realize, when we connect to each other, and I think it's so crucially important to foster a community of like-minded souls. Again, that's what we're doing in the school, and that's what we continue to do in deeper and deeper levels. But when you do that, then you start to really learn. You start to really know that you're not the only one who's afraid of what everybody thinks. No matter how much you try to hide it or hide yourself, everybody feels like that. Everybody's in a different stage of working on it or not working on it. You're not the only one who's ashamed if people would really know. This last week, I'm like more in a phase of letting it all hang out. I don't know if I've ever said this publicly before, but when I was 17 years old, I started college in 17. I graduated a little early, and I had so much shame, and I didn't know that it was called shame. I had no idea what it was, and finally, I was convinced to go to a therapist from the university, health service, which I also really resisted. When you have shame, you don't want to see the shame. And she asked me, "What's wrong? What do you come here for?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I guess everything's okay, except I feel like I can't believe I'm going to say this. I feel like I'm black with maggots crawling around inside of me." So now that seems really funny. Believe me, it didn't seem funny at the time. So again, better out than in. That blister that you want to pop and the pus, or that wound and the pus drains out. It doesn't look pretty at first, but when you understand that is, that's a distant memory. But if I hadn't experienced it and expressed it, I'd still be suppressing it. Where did that come from? That's core cosmic snake. And whether you feel that way or not, I think it was a little extreme in my case, which is probably one of the many reasons I'm so passionate about sharing all of this. But whatever it is, wherever you're at with it, there's something that you're here to elevate and transform. And there's something that if you would share it with others and you would see what's going on with others, it would become so much easier, because it's not personal and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. So let's understand, we'll just quickly recap. Confusion, it's part of the human project, and it started from the very beginning. So it's holy. Is it meant to stay in a state of confusion? No. Polarity, it's meant to be clarified, and that's the prophecy, as Prophet Daniel says, at the end of days, everything will be clarified, sifted and clarified, and the wise will understand. The foolish will not understand yet. Nobody has to stay foolish. The wise will understand. We're all meant to get wise. So that just goes with the program. The fact that it's chaotic and bursting out and that we are all seeing things from such a different perspective, this is only revealing the underlying truth. Das Tachton. That's underpinning every piece of negativity and suffering and exploitation and violence and sadness and whatever that's part of the human condition, because it's under the surface, it's hidden, it's a virus in the system. Talk about virus. These are viruses in the system. We want to not look at the virus like it's us. That's autoimmune, right? We want to look for the virus, because we know that it's our mission, it's our power, it's our divine purpose. It's literally hidden light that, as we start to look at it from Das Elyon, from a higher consciousness, a bigger frame, that light turns on and illuminates us from the inside. And then we can connect with each other and we can learn from each other. And each time we do, we have a bigger perspective, less Das Tachton, more toward Das Elyon, more toward higher consciousness, expanded consciousness. And to do that, you have to understand that the emotional underpinnings are simply snake energy trying to trip you and shut you down. So I think I'll leave it at that for right now. But again, I'm going to try to get on as much as possible. And what I would really love is, I can't say I'm going to answer every question on Facebook. I'd love it if you comment, tell me what you're most interested in, what, if something moves you or opens something for you or shifts something for you, share with your friends if you feel it would be beneficial for them. The connections that we can make now when we connect to the blueprint for creation, which is the divine design, which is the Torah, and especially Hasidus, authentic Kabbalah, which is the blueprint for creation and the path forward to true unity and higher consciousness, Das Elyon, and a rectification of all of the sadness, all of the sorrow, all of the fear, all of the pain. That to the degree that things have been dark over millennia, every piece of darkness contains within it a far more powerful blast of light. And each of those lights that goes on, it's like a fire that catches something else on fire. All we need to do is turn it around. Just connect to the bigger frame. Decide to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So I'm here to support if that appeals to you. So leave your comments, share the video, and if you and let me know what you want to know more about, so that can give me direction that will be helpful for you in future videos. So please ask your questions, make your requests, and here's what I feel like saying. You know, sometimes it's very intense. Sometimes lately, as in all, at the end of all birth processes, it's like gets more and more intense. And if you ever worked in like a labor and delivery ward, you would have heard people say, you know, women screaming, "I'm not doing this. I'm done. I'm going home." Or if they, you know, or "I'm never doing this. Usually, I'm never doing this again, but get me out of here. I can't." But that's at the time when that there's actually a phenomenon. I spoke once to my obstetrician after I had my youngest child, and he told me, "I love being an obstetrician." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the woman is so, the birth process is so primal and so all-consuming that the woman's mind gets confused and loses focus. And I feel like if I can be there and look into her eyes and make sure that everything is safe and okay, then she can make that transition from the last phases of the labor to the utter joy of the birth like this. And it goes from chaos and fear and total confusion to absolute wonder, peace, calm." That's what we're talking about here. So, yeah, Shiphrah was the name of one of the mother of Moses and one of the midwives who helped deliver babies in Egypt. So, if I can play a role in helping to deliver, you know, for anybody who wants that help, you know, helping to deliver that truer, deeper self, that bigger frame, that emotional freedom, that sorrow to joy, then that would be my deepest honor and joy myself. Anyway, not to get too emotional. So I'm going to leave it here, but just know that it is intense because not because we're far from the end and not because things are falling apart. And that's the most important point I can leave you with. Not because things are falling apart and not because we're far from the end, but because we're at the end. And the end is just intense. That's the way God made it. And as you learn the bigger frame, you'll understand why. Okay. Mwah! So much love. Wishing you joy and blessings and wisdom and Das Elyon, higher consciousness, connection, freedom, insight, healing, and so much more. Geula. Mashiach now. See you next time.